This happened years ago. I've never liked camping. The dirt, the bugs, the sleepless nights on hard ground, but my dad loved it. Every summer, he dragged me into the woods to disconnect from the world. By high school, I'd had enough. I told him I'd only go if I could bring a friend. He agreed, so I brought Charles, a former Boy Scout who actually liked this stuff. I thought he'd make it worse, but he didn't. Everything went wrong the moment we arrived. The campsite wasn't deep in nature like usual. It had paved paths, bathrooms, even a playground. My dad was furious, but the weirdest part, right next to it was an amusement park, Ferris wheel, music, laughter echoing through the trees. It felt wrong, like two worlds that shouldn't exist together. That night, as Charles and I sat by our tent, I remember thinking this trip already felt strange. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. I don't smoke weed anymore, and sometimes I wonder if I ever actually liked it, or if I just wanted to feel like I didn't belong. Back then, rebellion felt cool. That night, though, it felt like freedom. Charles and I slipped quietly into the woods behind our tent, trying not to laugh too loud as we passed the fire pit where the adults were still talking. The forest was dark and damp, the kind of quiet that makes every sound feel twice as loud. The flame from Charles's lighter flickered against his face as he lit the pipe. We took turns, sitting on a fallen log, whispering jokes, feeling that slow, warm fog creep into our heads. When we finally headed back, it was already late. The camp had gone still. Only the faint buzz of insects and the hum of a distant generator filled the air. We lay in our tent, talking nonsense for hours, until Charles suddenly grinned in that way that always meant trouble. "You still got that energy?" he whispered. I did. My heart was racing for no reason. "Let's go explore," he said. I thought he meant the campsite, but then he tilted his head toward the direction of the amusement park. That's when I realized what he really meant. "Dude, no way," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing, even to me. He laughed. "Come on, man, just one look from the top, imagine the view." He was right, it did sound thrilling. We were both obsessed with climbing stuff, always chasing that rush. And something about doing it here in the middle of the night made it feel like an adventure we couldn't pass up. Around midnight, after making sure everyone was asleep, we grabbed our flashlights and quietly slipped out of the tent. The moonlight cut through the trees as we crept toward the park. The fence wasn't high, just a metal chain link with a small sign that said no trespassing. Charles crouched, cupped his hands, and gave me a boost. The metal rattled softly under my shoes, and then I was over. He climbed after me, landing with a soft thud on the other side. The park was eerily silent. All those colorful rides that looked so cheerful by day were now lifeless shadows under a silver sky. The Ferris wheel stood tall like a giant skeleton, and the roller coaster tracks twisted through the dark like the ribs of something dead. Every now and then, the distant hum of a golf cart echoed through the park. Security. We ducked behind a booth painted in faded stripes and peeked out. The headlights swept across the ground, then disappeared. We moved like we were in a stealth video game, sneaking between buildings, crouching low, our breaths shallow. At one point, we had to run across an open walkway to avoid a passing guard. My legs felt light, my heart hammering in my throat. It was scary but exciting. We were laughing quietly, feeding off the adrenaline. It felt like being alive in a way I'd never felt before. Then we saw it. The roller coaster. Up close, it was massive, towering over everything else. The steel track disappeared into the clouds. "Let's do it," Charles whispered, pointing to the maintenance stairs. They looked flimsy, but they were the only way up. One step at a time we climbed, the metal groaning under our shoes. Every clang sounded too loud. At one point, there were no railings, just open air beside us. My stomach twisted as I looked down at the empty park below. When we reached the top, it was breathtaking. The view stretched for miles, the campsites glowing faintly in the distance, the forest stretching like an ocean of black. The air was colder up there, thin and sharp. Charles pulled out his phone and snapped a quick photo. Just one. I wish we had taken more, but deep down, I think both of us knew we were pushing our luck. "Okay," I said, trying to laugh. "Let's get down before someone spots us." He nodded, still grinning. The climb down felt longer, quieter. Every sound made us freeze. Finally, our feet hit solid ground again. The relief was instant. We started back the way we came, moving faster now, wanting to be done with it. But something was different. The air felt heavier. The shadows seemed darker. The sound of the guards' golf carts had stopped. As we turned a corner near a snack shack, we suddenly heard one coming again. We ducked behind the building, holding our breath. The headlights passed, lighting up the cracked pavement, and that's when I saw it. Something moved. Just a flicker in the dark, about 30 feet away. I squinted, thinking maybe it was the reflection of light on metal, or a trick of the shadows. Then Charles grabbed my arm and pointed. There it was again, something crouched low between two buildings. Person. At first I thought maybe it was another guard, or maybe some other stupid kid like us, sneaking around. But the shape didn't look right. The way it moved, slow, twitchy, almost broken. The worst part was the feeling that it was watching us. I could feel its stare even in the dark. My mouth went dry. The guard's cart passed, the hum fading into silence, but we didn't move. The figure started shifting, then suddenly it darted out of the shadows, crossing into a faint pool of light. I saw him clearly for 1 second. It was a man, older than us, maybe late 30s, wearing torn clothes. His body looked twisted, his steps uneven, like one leg didn't work right, and on his face, there was something dark smeared across his skin. It looked like blood. Not old, not dry. Wet and glistening under the light. Charles gasped. I felt my stomach drop. The man's head twitched in our direction, and then, just as fast as he'd appeared, he slipped back into the shadows. Neither of us spoke. We waited until we were sure the guard was gone, then bolted. My hands were shaking as I climbed the fence. We hit the ground running and didn't stop until we were back at our tent. The laughter was gone. We didn't say a word. We just crawled into our sleeping bags, still in our clothes, staring at the ceiling of the tent. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Some drunk, some homeless guy wandering near the park. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I could still see his face every time I blinked. That slick red smear. That limp. Morning came too fast. The sunlight didn't make me feel any safer. We ate breakfast quietly, pretending nothing had happened. Around 10, a staff member came by, calling out to all the campers. He told us there'd been an incident at a lake a few miles away. A man had been stabbed to death during the night, and the killer was still out there. The police had issued a warning to every campground nearby. They said the suspect was a disheveled white male in his late 30s, possibly shirtless, possibly bleeding. Charles and I just looked at each other. No words, no jokes this time. It was him. I know it was. It's like a silent scar we both carry. Sometimes I still see his face in my dreams. The man in the dark. That broken walk. That blood on his skin. What really haunts me isn't that we saw him. It's knowing how close we were. Just a few feet between life and something unspeakable. This happened in October of 2016, right in the middle of that creepy clown craze everyone was talking about. You remember that, right? Those videos popping up everywhere, clowns standing in the woods, chasing cars, showing up outside schools. Most of it turned out to be fake, people just trying to go viral, but not all of it. A few of those stories were real, and what happened to me was one of them. I was 16, a junior in high school. It was just another normal weekday. I'd finished my last class, said goodbye to my friends, and caught the 6 train heading uptown. The car was almost empty, which was weird but not impossible for that hour. I didn't think much of it. I had my headphones in, music blasting, probably Drake. And I was half studying for a chemistry test, flipping through flashcards on my phone, basically. I couldn't have been more distracted if I tried. I planned to get off at 96th Street and walk home like I always did. Just a regular Wednesday, no reason to think anything was different. No reason to think that ride would turn into one of the scariest moments of my life. Things went bad fast. The train slowed at 96th Street, and like always, I got up without thinking, eyes still on my phone, music blasting in my ears. I'd done this route so many times it was second nature. Stand, walk, step off. But the second the doors slid open, something blocked my way. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flash of color. I looked up and froze. A man stood in the doorway, but not just any man. A clown. He wore baggy rainbow pants, a wrinkled yellow shirt held up by red suspenders, and giant red shoes that squeaked when he shifted his weight. His face was covered in thick white paint, smeared like it had been on for hours. Blue streaks above his eyes, a red nose, and that same stretched, exaggerated grin clowns are supposed to have, but his lips weren't moving. The makeup did the smiling for him. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there, perfectly still, blocking my only exit. For a second, my brain just shut down. It was October, sure, But this didn't feel like a costume or a prank. There was something wrong with him. Something too still, too focused. The doors would close in seconds, and I had to move. I yanked one earbud out and muttered, "Excuse me?" trying to squeeze past. The second I brushed his arm, he leaned down in one smooth, creepy motion, like he wanted to look straight into my eyes. His breath smelled sweet and rotten at the same time, like spoiled candy. Before I could think, I shoved past him and bolted out the doors. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it pounding in my ears. I hit the platform and started running, but almost instantly I heard footsteps behind me. He was chasing me. The sound echoed through the empty station, those squeaky shoes slapping against the tile floor. I turned back for a second and saw him coming after me, arms jerking awkwardly, like his limbs didn't work right. And then I saw it. In his hand. A knife. A plain kitchen knife, but it glinted under the fluorescent light. My stomach dropped. I didn't think, I just ran. I sprinted up the stairs, 2 steps at a time, lungs burning, praying someone would be up there. The second I burst through the doors and hit the street, I screamed for help. Cars passed, people turned. I didn't even care how I sounded. I just needed someone to notice. The clown didn't follow me out. I kept glancing back, waiting to see that painted face at the top of the stairs, but he never came. When the police showed up, I told them everything. What he looked like, what he was wearing, the knife. They went down to search the station, but by the time they got there, he was gone. I remember standing on the sidewalk, shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. The world around me kept moving. People walking, talking, laughing, as if nothing had happened, but I knew what I saw. And I knew how close I'd been. Just a few seconds slower, and I might not have made it out of that subway alive. Even after talking to the police and hearing them say I was safe, I couldn't shake that feeling, that deep, irrational fear that somehow he knew where I lived, that he'd followed me, that maybe one night I'd look out my window and see that white-painted face smiling up at me from the street. Of course, that never happened, nothing else ever did, no follow-up call, no news report, no answers, just silence. Part of me thinks the story probably got buried with the rest of those weird clown sightings that year. Maybe he was caught. Maybe he just disappeared. I'll never really know. It took me weeks to feel normal again, to ride the train without flinching every time the doors opened, to stop scanning every face that passed me on the platform. But the fear never truly left. It just learned how to stay quiet. Even now, when I think back on it, I realize how lucky I was. One wrong step, one moment of hesitation, and I might have become another name in the news instead of someone telling this story years later. This isn't your typical scary story, there are no ghosts or monsters here, but it's still one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me. I was 2 years out of college, working random gigs to make ends meet. One night, while scrolling through Indeed, I found a job listing that caught my eye. A private lifeguard position at a hotel a few towns over. Seemed normal at first, until I looked closer. The hours were completely backward. They wanted someone to watch over the pool from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., night shift. For a hotel pool. Weird, right? But what really threw me off was this one line written in bold. Applicants must not speak Spanish. That made no sense. I've spoken Spanish since I was a kid. I'm half Mexican and the town was mostly Spanish speaking. So why would that matter? Still, the pay was $30 an hour, which felt like gold back then, so I ignored the red flags, pretended not to know Spanish, and applied. A few hours later, I got an interview. No questions, no phone call, just a date, a time, and an address. And that's where things started to get strange. The first day started out like any other new job. I pulled up to the hotel and at first glance everything looked normal. A little outdated maybe, but clean and quiet. As I got out of my car, this short, heavy-set guy walked out to meet me. He had a friendly smile, introduced himself, and cracked a few jokes right off the bat. His name was Esteban. Or at least, that's what I thought he said. He was easy to talk to, and his warm attitude immediately put me at ease. I remember thinking, okay, maybe this place isn't as weird as the ad made it sound. But then, as we were walking toward the main building, another man turned the corner. A tall, lean guy with a cold stare that immediately made my skin crawl. His eyes locked onto me, and in that instant I could tell he was sizing me up, profiling me. It felt rehearsed. like he was testing me for something I didn't understand. For a second, I wondered if having the friendly guy greet me first was just a way to make me drop my guard. The tall man walked straight up to me without saying hello or even smiling. He started speaking in Spanish, fast, casual, but clearly on purpose. He was testing me. I understood every word he said, but I kept my expression blank, pretending I didn't have a clue. He rambled about the weather, something meaningless, while watching my reaction. I just shrugged. After a few awkward seconds, the two men exchanged a glance and burst out laughing. The tension broke instantly. But it didn't feel funny. It felt like I had just passed a test I didn't know I was taking. The taller man introduced himself as Jefe, which I later realized literally meant boss in Spanish, and the shorter one was indeed Esteban. They told me to follow them, and the three of us walked through the complex toward the pool. Jefe started explaining the job, why they needed someone for these late hours. According to him, the hotel was opening its pool to outside guests to bring in extra revenue. Think of it like a community pool, he said. You'll collect fees, keep an eye on things, and call me if there's a problem. It sounded simple enough. Still, the Spanish requirement, or rather, the no Spanish requirement, didn't sit right with me. When I asked about it, Jefe said it was to avoid issues with rowdy outsiders. It didn't make sense, but $30, 0 cents an hour made it easier not to ask more questions. Before we left, he added one more rule. If anyone showed me a blue wristband, I was to let them into a building behind the pool called the pool house. I wasn't allowed to go inside, just unlock the door for them. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. The job was easy, just long, quiet nights by the water, collecting small fees from locals who wanted to swim. The pool was busier than I expected, but no one ever showed me a wristband. That changed about a month in. One night, a large guy in a crisp white shirt and sunglasses came up to me. It was dark, and he didn't say a word. He just lifted his wrist, a blue band. My stomach tightened a little, but I did what I was told. I unlocked the pool house, and he disappeared inside. About an hour later, he came back out, his backpack noticeably bulkier than before. He gave me a polite nod and left. After that, wristbands started showing up more often. One at first, then groups of 2 or 3, always at night, always quiet. They'd go in, stay a while, and leave with bags that seemed heavier than when they arrived. Around the same time, I noticed something else. People using the pool started paying me way too much. Some would hand me $100 0 cents bills for a $20 0 cents entry and just tell me to keep the change. When I called Jefe about it, he brushed me off with a quick laugh. People make mistakes, he said, and hung up before I could say another word. That's when it hit me. The pieces all fell together. The money, the wristbands, the late hours, the secrecy. I realized I wasn't just guarding a pool. I was sitting next to an operation I had no business being near. Drugs, money laundering, illegal deals. Whatever it was happening just feet away from me, behind that locked door. And I was part of it, whether I wanted to be or not. Still, I stayed. The job paid too well, and I was scared of what would happen if I tried to quit. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong, I was just the lifeguard, but deep down, I knew that was a lie. As the weeks went on, the people with wristbands got friendlier. Some started calling me by name, giving me tips, even joking around. The more they trusted me, the more careless they became. They'd talk freely around me, switching between English and Spanish, and even though I pretended not to understand, I caught enough to confirm my fears. They were moving product. Big time. One afternoon, something unexpected happened. A little boy almost drowned. I jumped in and pulled him out before he went under completely. His father, panicked and crying, ran over. Turns out that kid was Jefe's son. Later that night, Jefe himself came down to the pool, thanked me, and said he owed me his life. For the first time, I saw genuine emotion in him. He even gave me a bonus and said I'd earned everyone's respect. The next day, when I showed up for work, half the men from the night shift were waiting by the gate with glasses of wine. They toasted me for saving the boy, and for a moment I actually felt proud, like maybe I had done something good. But that moment didn't last. During the toast, one of them stood up and gave a speech in Spanish. My heart sank as I understood every word. He wasn't just celebrating me, he was bragging about how much money they were making, how many lives they were destroying, and how everything was running perfectly because nobody talked. Everyone laughed and drank. I forced a smile, pretending I didn't understand, but inside I felt sick. That night I went home and told myself I'd quit. But the next day, something stopped me. My mom called while I was at work. She rarely called unless it was serious, so I climbed down from the lifeguard chair and stepped into a quiet corner to talk. My mom only speaks Spanish, so that's the language we used. I don't even remember what we talked about, just that it was short and normal. But when I hung up and turned around, Esteban was standing right there. He wasn't smiling this time. He looked different, harder, cold. After a long, heavy silence, he asked, "How long have you known Spanish?" My mouth went dry. My brain scrambled for an answer. I laughed nervously and said something like, "Oh, I've been learning it on my own, just practicing with a friend." But he didn't buy it. He just stared at me, no expression, no reaction. Just that same unnerving silence that felt like it lasted forever. Then, finally, he said one word, "Okay," and turned to leave. I climbed back up to my chair trying to act normal, but my hands were shaking so hard I could barely sit still. Every time someone walked by, I thought they were coming for me. I wanted to leave, but I was terrified that doing so would make things worse. They knew my name. They probably knew where I lived. For the rest of my shift, I just sat there, praying for it to end. When it finally did, Esteban came back. He smiled this time, but it didn't feel genuine. He handed me a couple $100 and said, "Come in an hour early tomorrow. We have a new opportunity for you." Then he walked away. And for the first time since I started that job, I realized I wasn't just scared. I was trapped. When I left the hotel that day, I knew I'd never go back. There was no good ending waiting for me there. For months after, I was a paranoid mess, jumping at every noise, checking every car that parked on my street, always feeling like someone was watching. Even now, I still don't understand everything. They were clearly moving drugs, maybe more, but why they needed me, that's the part that still haunts me. Someone the cops wouldn't question. Someone the cops wouldn't question. Sometimes I think about the way Esteban stared at me that last day. The look in his eyes said it all. If I hadn't left, I don't think I'd be here telling this story. So, tell me, what would you have done if you were me?